Vicious leopard cat devours little boy during playtime. The house was filled with the warm hum of family life, laughter echoing off the walls as Tommy ran through the living room with his favorite toy, a small stuffed mouse attached to a string. His little feet padded across the wooden floor, his giggles pure and innocent, oblivious to the subtle shift in the air. The leopard cat named Leo, lounging on the couch, raised his head, his golden eyes locked on the swaying toy. His body tensed slightly, muscles coiling beneath his sleek spotted coat. "Leo, catch!" Tommy exclaimed, tossing the toy gently toward the feline. The cat's eyes followed it, his pupils narrowing into slits as he calculated the movement. In a flash, he sprang from the couch, landing gracefully on all fours. His movements were fluid, almost too fast to follow, a reminder of his wild nature despite the cozy domestic scene. Tommy clapped his hands with excitement, delighted by Leo's reaction. "Good boy," he praised, crouching down to pick up the toy and dangle it again. Leo's tail flicked lazily, his gaze fixed on the toy, his predatory instincts barely concealed beneath his calm exterior. From the kitchen, Tommy's mother, Sarah, watched the interaction with a fond smile. "Tommy, be gentle with Leo, okay? He's not like other cats," she reminded him, her voice soft but firm. She wiped her hands on a towel, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was nearing dinner time, and she had a feeling she'd be calling Tommy more than once before he'd be willing to abandon playtime. "I am, Mom," Tommy called back, not taking his eyes off Leo. "He loves playing with me. Don't you, Leo?" Leo didn't respond, of course, but his ears twitched as Tommy moved the toy in front of him again. His focus sharpened, his body lowering slightly, every muscle in his small frame ready to spring. There was something in his posture, something just a bit too intense, too focused, but it went unnoticed in the boy's excitement. Leo pounced again, swiping at the toy with his paw, but this time his claws extended just slightly, grazing the fabric. Tommy laughed and yanked the toy back, his movements growing quicker and more unpredictable. "Whoa, look at you, Leo. You're a real wild cat," Tommy declared proudly. Leo's ears flattened briefly, his tail lashing once. He crouched lower, eyes locked onto Tommy now, not the toy. His breathing slowed, his body language shifting in a way that only an experienced eye would have caught, a hunter calculating his next move. In the kitchen, Sarah turned her attention back to dinner, humming softly as she stirred the sauce bubbling on the stove. She had no idea how quickly things were about to spiral out of control. Tommy, oblivious to the subtle warning signs, took a step closer to Leo, holding out the toy. "Come on, Leo. One more time. I bet you can catch it even faster." Leo's eyes didn't leave Tommy. His tail stopped moving. For a split second, the room felt too quiet, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, Leo lunged. Not at the toy, but at Tommy. Tommy barely had time to register what was happening. One moment he was laughing, the next he was on the floor, his arm pinned beneath the cat's powerful grip. Leo's teeth sunk into the fabric of Tommy's shirt, his claws digging into his skin just enough to sting. "Mom!" Tommy cried out, his voice high-pitched and terrified. Sarah spun around, her heart leaping into her throat at the sight before her. She dropped the spoon she was holding, the clatter echoing in the kitchen as she rushed toward her son. "Leo, no!" she shouted, her voice trembling with panic. She reached down, grabbing the cat by the scruff of his neck, trying to pull him away, but Leo's grip was unrelenting. His eyes were wild, his instincts fully awakened. Tommy sobbed, his little body trembling as Sarah finally managed to pry the cat off him. She held Leo at arm's length, her own heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She looked down at Tommy, taking in the scratches on his arm and the torn fabric of his shirt. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him and inspecting the shallow wounds. They weren't deep, but they were enough to leave red welts on his pale skin. Tommy nodded through his tears, clutching his arm. "It hurts, Mom." Sarah hugged him tightly, her mind racing. How could this have happened? Leo had always been playful, sure, but never like this. Never aggressive. She glanced at the cat, who had wriggled free from her grip and now sat calmly by the couch, licking his paw as though nothing had happened. "Leo," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her heart ached with confusion and fear. How could a beloved family pet turn so suddenly, so viciously? Tommy clung to her, his sobs quieting but his body still shaking. "Why did he do that, Mom? I thought he was my friend." Sarah didn't have an answer. Not yet. All she knew was that something was wrong. Very wrong. She helped Tommy to his feet, guiding him toward the bathroom to clean his wounds. "It's okay, sweetie. Let's get you cleaned up, and then we'll talk about what happened." As she ran warm water over his arm, her thoughts spiraled. Had she missed something? Were there signs she hadn't noticed? Memories flashed through her mind. The moments when Leo had hissed unexpectedly. The times he had stared at Tommy with a strange intensity. She had brushed them off, thinking it was just part of owning an exotic pet. But now, staring at the scratches on her son's arm, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. In the living room, Leo watched them from his spot by the couch, his golden eyes unblinking. His tail flicked once, twice, before curling around his body as he settled in to watch, waiting. Sarah finished cleaning Tommy's wounds, dabbing them gently with antiseptic while he winced. His eyes, still watery from crying, stayed fixed on his mother, searching for reassurance. She tried her best to keep calm, her face betraying none of the panic swirling in her mind. "There," she said softly, pressing a clean bandage over his arm. "Good as new. You're such a brave boy." She kissed his forehead, hoping her touch would soothe his fear. "Why don't you go sit in your room for a bit? I'll bring you a snack soon." Tommy nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Is Leo mad at me, Mom?" Sarah paused, her heart twisting. "No, sweetie. Leo's just a little confused right now. Don't worry. Okay?" Tommy nodded again, though it was clear the question still lingered in his mind. As he padded off toward his room, Sarah remained behind, her thoughts a whirlwind. She leaned against the bathroom counter, gripping the edge tightly. What had gone wrong? This wasn't just a harmless scratch or playful roughhousing. This was something far more dangerous. She could still see the wild look in Leo's eyes, the way his body had coiled like a predator ready to strike. He hadn't just been playing, he had been hunting. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was no ordinary house cat. Leo was a leopard cat, an exotic species known for their beauty but also for their wild instincts. When they had first adopted him, the breeder had assured her that leopard cats could adapt to domestic life as long as they were raised with love and care. And for the most part, it had seemed true. Leo had been a playful, curious addition to the family. He followed Tommy around the house, napped in the sunniest spots, and even curled up on the couch during movie nights. But every so often, there had been flickers of something darker. A reminder that, no matter how tame he seemed, Leo still carried the wildness of his ancestors in his blood. She walked back into the living room, her eyes scanning for Leo. He hadn't moved from his spot by the couch, his head resting on his paws as if nothing unusual had happened. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. "Leo," she said cautiously, taking a step closer. His ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. "What happened back there, huh?" Leo blinked slowly, his golden eyes locking with hers. There was something unsettling in his gaze, something that sent a chill down her spine. She moved toward the couch and reached out a hand, hesitating just a moment before stroking his back. His fur was soft beneath her fingers, and for a second, everything felt normal again. But then, without warning, Leo turned his head and snapped at her hand. Not hard enough to break the skin, but enough to make her jerk back in shock. "Leo," she gasped, clutching her hand to her chest. The cat stared at her for a long moment before turning away, curling back into a ball as if nothing had happened. Sarah's heart raced. This wasn't right. Leo had never acted like this before. Was he sick? Hurt? Or was something else going on? She backed away slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Reaching for her phone, she opened the browser and began typing furiously. Leopard cat aggression signs. Her eyes scanned the search results, her stomach sinking with each line she read. Leopard cats were known for their unpredictable behavior, especially during adolescence. Even the most well-adjusted leopard cats could have sudden bursts of aggression, triggered by stress, overstimulation, or even something as simple as a sudden change in their environment. Sarah's mind reeled. Had something changed recently? The house had been the same. Their routines hadn't shifted much. What could have caused this sudden outburst? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Tommy calling from his room. "Mom, Leo's in here." Panic surged through her veins as she hurried down the hall. Tommy stood in the doorway, pointing toward his bed. "He followed me in here. I think he wants to play again." Sarah froze. Leo was crouched at the foot of Tommy's bed, his eyes locked on the boy. His body language was tense, his tail twitching slightly. "Tommy," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Step back slowly. Come stand by me." Tommy hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. "But Mom, he's not doing anything. Just come here, sweetie," Sarah insisted, her heart pounding. Nice and slow, Tommy did as he was told, backing away until he was at her side. Sarah placed a protective hand on his shoulder, her eyes never leaving Leo. The cat didn't move, but there was something in his posture that put her on high alert. His muscles were coiled, ready to spring at a moment's notice. "Come on," Sarah said, guiding Tommy out of the room. "Let's close the door for now, okay? Give Leo some space." She closed the door gently, leaning against it as she tried to catch her breath. Tommy looked up at her, worry etched into his small face. "Is Leo mad again?" he asked quietly. Sarah forced a smile, though it felt thin and fragile. "No, honey. He just needs some time to calm down." Tommy didn't seem convinced, but he nodded and shuffled off to the living room. Sarah stayed behind, her hands still on the door handle, her mind racing. This was getting out of hand. She couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Leo wasn't just having a bad day. Something was seriously wrong. But what could she do? She couldn't leave him locked in Tommy's room forever. She needed help. Picking up her phone again, she scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for Dr. Larson, the exotic animal veterinarian they had taken Leo to for his checkups. The phone rang twice before a calm, familiar voice answered. "Dr. Larson speaking." "Hi, Dr. Larson." To Sarah. I need your help," she said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "It's about Leo. He attacked Tommy today, out of nowhere, and now he's acting strange, aggressive." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tell me everything," Dr. Larson said, his voice serious but reassuring. Sarah recounted the day's events in detail, her words tumbling out in a rush. When she finished, there was another pause. "It sounds like Leo might be experiencing a stress response," Dr. Larson said finally. "It's not uncommon for exotic cats to have moments like this. Their instincts can be hard to suppress, especially if they feel threatened or overstimulated." "But nothing's changed," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "Everything's been the same. I don't understand." "Sometimes it doesn't take much," Dr. Larson explained. "It could be something small that set him off. A noise, a smell, even a sudden movement. The important thing is to give him space and watch for any more signs of aggression. If it continues, we might need to discuss other options." Sarah swallowed hard. "Other options?" "I'll be honest with you, Sarah. Leopard cats aren't fully domesticated. They can be unpredictable, and if their behavior becomes dangerous, rehoming might be the safest choice." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Rehoming? The thought of giving Leo up was almost too much to bear. But as she glanced toward Tommy, who was curled up on the couch with his favorite blanket, she knew she couldn't take any chances. "I'll keep an eye on him," she said quietly. "Thank you, Dr. Larson. Call me if anything changes," he replied. "And stay safe." Sarah hung up the phone, her hand trembling slightly as she set it down on the counter. Her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions: fear, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. How had it come to this? Leo wasn't just a pet. He was part of their family. The idea of giving him up felt like a betrayal, but she couldn't ignore what had just happened. For the rest of the evening, Sarah kept a close eye on Leo. He had remained in Tommy's room, calm but eerily watchful, his eyes following her every time she peeked in. She tried to act like everything was normal for Tommy's sake, but it was impossible to shake the lingering tension in the air. Dinner was unusually quiet. Tommy picked at his food, stealing nervous glances down the hallway where Leo remained. Sarah forced herself to eat, but every bite felt heavy in her throat. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Hey, buddy," she said, putting down her fork and leaning across the table. "How about we watch a movie after dinner? Just you and me." Tommy's face lit up, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since the incident. "Really? Can we watch the dinosaur one?" "Of course," Sarah replied, ruffling his hair. "Go pick it out and I'll clean up here." Tommy dashed off to the living room, and Sarah allowed herself a small sigh of relief. For now, things were calm. But deep down, she knew this was just a temporary reprieve. As the movie played, Sarah sat on the couch with Tommy snuggled against her side, his head resting on her arm. She tried to lose herself in the colorful animation on the screen, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Leo. The image of him lunging at Tommy replayed in her mind like a loop she couldn't escape. The familiar purring sound from the hallway snapped her out of her thoughts. Her eyes flicked toward the doorway just in time to see Leo emerging from the shadows, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He walked slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed on Tommy. Sarah's body tensed instinctively. "Leo," she called softly, trying to keep her voice calm. "Come here, boy." Leo paused, his ears twitching at the sound of her voice. For a brief moment, she thought he might actually listen. But instead, he turned his attention back to Tommy, his posture stiffening. "Tommy," Sarah whispered, gently nudging him. "I want you to go into the kitchen for a minute. Okay?" Tommy looked up at her, confused. "Why?" "Just trust me. Go get your juice box from the fridge." Reluctantly, Tommy got up and shuffled toward the kitchen. Sarah stood slowly, keeping her eyes locked on Leo. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved between him and Tommy, her pulse loud in her ears. "Leo, stop," she said firmly, holding out her hand. "It's me. It's okay." But Leo didn't stop. His tail lashed back and forth, his body language unmistakably aggressive. Sarah took a step back, her breath quickening. "Leo, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice trembling. And then it happened, faster than she could react. Leo sprang forward, his claws extended, teeth bared. Sarah threw up her arm to shield herself, feeling his claws rake across her sleeve. The force of the impact sent her stumbling back into the coffee table, pain shooting through her arm. "Mom!" Tommy screamed from the kitchen doorway, frozen in shock. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her adrenaline kicking into overdrive. She grabbed a blanket from the couch and flung it over Leo, wrapping him up as he thrashed and hissed. Her heart raced as she struggled to contain him, her hands trembling with the effort. "Tommy, call Dr. Larson," she shouted, her voice strained. "The number's on the fridge." Tommy ran to the kitchen, his little fingers fumbling with the phone. Sarah tightened her grip on the writhing bundle, sweat pouring down her face as she tried to hold on. After what felt like an eternity, Tommy returned, clutching the phone. "He's on the line, Mom." Sarah pressed the phone to her ear, still holding Leo with her other hand. "Dr. Larson, it's happening again. He attacked me this time. I don't know what to do." "Stay calm." Dr. Larson's voice was steady but urgent. "Can you secure him somewhere safe? A bathroom, maybe?" "Yes," Sarah gasped. "I think I can. Do it now. Then lock the door and call animal control." "I'll meet you there." Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay. Thank you." Hanging up, she gritted her teeth and carried Leo, still wrapped in the blanket, down the hall to the guest bathroom. His growls vibrated through the fabric, but he was weakening, his struggles growing less frantic. She gently set him on the bathroom floor and backed out, slamming the door shut and locking it. Leaning against the door, she let out a long, shaky breath. Her body ached. Her arms stung where his claws had grazed her. But all she could think about was Tommy. He stood at the end of the hallway, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Mom, is Leo going to be okay?" Sarah crossed the distance between them and scooped him into her arms, holding him close. "I don't know, sweetheart," she admitted, her voice cracking, "but we're going to be okay. Promise." The next hour passed in a blur. Animal control arrived, followed shortly by Dr. Larson. They spoke in calm, professional tones, but Sarah could see the gravity of the situation reflected in their eyes. Leo was sedated and taken away, his body limp and peaceful as they carried him out. Dr. Larson stayed behind, his expression somber. "Sarah, you did the right thing," he said gently. "Leo's instincts were too strong. It's not your fault, but it feels like my fault," Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I should have seen this coming. I should have done more." "You gave him a good life," Dr. Larson said. "Better than most leopard cats get. But sometimes, they just can't adapt. It's in their nature." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "What happens now?" "We'll evaluate him at the facility," Dr. Larson explained. "If he can be rehabilitated, we'll find a more suitable home for him. Somewhere where his wild instincts won't be a danger." "And if he can't be rehabilitated?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Larson hesitated. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." As he left, Sarah sank onto the couch, exhaustion crashing down on her like a wave. Tommy climbed up beside her, curling into her side. "Is Leo gone?" he asked quietly. "For now," Sarah said, stroking his hair. "He's going somewhere he'll be safe. And so will we." Tommy nodded, his eyes growing heavy with sleep. "I miss him already." "Me too," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Me too." And as the house finally fell silent, Sarah stared at the spot where Leo had once lounged, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had lost, and the knowledge that, sometimes, even love isn't enough to tame the wild. The next morning felt eerily quiet without Leo. The house, once filled with his soft purring and playful footsteps, now seemed too big, too empty. Sarah woke up with a dull ache in her chest, a strange mix of relief and sadness weighing her down. The events of the previous night played over and over in her mind like a bad dream she couldn't shake. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, poking at his cereal with little interest. Normally, he would be chattering away about his plans for the day, but today he was silent. His eyes drifted toward the hallway every few minutes, as though he were expecting Leo to come sauntering back in at any moment. "Hey, buddy," Sarah said, sitting down beside him. "How are you feeling?" Tommy shrugged. "Okay, I guess." She reached out and gently touched his hand. "It's okay to feel sad. I miss him too." Tommy looked up at her, his eyes brimming with tears. "Do you think Leo's mad at us?" Sarah's heart twisted. "No, sweetie. Leo's not mad. He needs to be somewhere where he can be free. Somewhere he'll be happy and safe." Tommy nodded slowly, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. "I hope he's happy." "I'm sure he will be," Sarah said, pulling him into a hug. "And we'll be okay too. Promise." The rest of the day passed in a haze of normalcy. Laundry, cleaning, answering emails. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of loss that hung over her like a dark cloud. Every time she walked past Tommy's room, she half expected to see Leo curled up on the bed, his golden eyes watching her with that calm, steady gaze. By late afternoon, she found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone. Pictures of Tommy and Leo during happier times. There was the one of them playing in the backyard, Tommy laughing as Leo chased a butterfly. Another of Leo perched on the windowsill, his head tilted as he watched the rain outside. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she swiped through the images. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? She had truly believed they could give Leo a good life, that he could be part of their family. And for a while it had worked. But now, those memories felt like fragments of a dream that had slipped through her fingers. Her phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her back to reality. It was Dr. Larson. "Hello," she answered, her voice unsteady. "Hi, Sarah. I wanted to give you an update on Leo," Dr. Larson said. "He's doing okay. We've got him settled in at the rehabilitation center. He's calm for now, but it's clear that his wild instincts are deeply ingrained. We'll be monitoring him closely." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Thank you. I've been so worried." "I know," Dr. Larson said gently. "You did everything you could. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, some animals just aren't meant for domestication. But I want you to know that you gave him a chance, a real chance. And that means something." Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Thank you, Dr. Larson. That means a lot." After the call ended, Sarah sat quietly for a moment, absorbing his words. It wasn't the ending she had hoped for, but it was the best one they could give Leo under the circumstances. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Sarah and Tommy sat on the porch together. The air was cool, the scent of freshly cut grass lingering on the breeze. "Mom," Tommy said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Yeah, sweetie, do you think Leo will remember us?" Sarah smiled softly. "I think so, and even if he doesn't, we'll always remember him. That's what matters." Tommy rested his head on her shoulder, his small hand slipping into hers. "I miss him." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I miss him too." For a while, they just sat there watching the sky change colors. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, Sarah realized that they would be okay. The house might feel a little emptier without Leo, but it was still their home. They would heal little by little, day by day. The days turned into weeks, and the sting of Leo's absence began to soften. Life moved on as it always does. Tommy returned to his usual cheerful self, playing with his toys and telling Sarah all about his adventures at school. The house slowly regained its warmth, though a part of it would always hold a space for Leo. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the rehabilitation center. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, her eyes scanning the neatly typed words. "Dear Sarah, we wanted to update you on Leo's progress. He has adjusted well to life at the center and has shown significant improvement in his behavior. Given his strong instincts, we've decided to relocate him to a wildlife sanctuary, where he will have the space and freedom he needs to thrive. We believe this is the best environment for him, a place where he can truly be himself. Thank you for giving him a chance and for trusting us with his care. Sincerely, Dr. Larson." A wave of relief washed over Sarah as she finished reading. A sanctuary. It was the perfect place for Leo, a place where he could live out his days in peace, surrounded by nature. She called Tommy into the living room, holding the letter in her hand. "Guess what?" she said, a smile breaking across her face. "Leo's going to live at a sanctuary. It's a big, beautiful place where he'll have lots of space to run and play." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Really? That sounds perfect." "It is," Sarah said, pulling him into a hug. "He's going to be so happy there." From that day on, whenever they thought of Leo, it wasn't with sadness but with fondness. They imagined him running through fields of tall grass, climbing trees, and basking in the sunlight. He was free just as he was always meant to be. And though their home was quieter without him, it was still filled with love. The kind of love that never fades, even when it has to let go. As the seasons changed and time carried them forward, Sarah often found herself glancing at the spot where Leo used to sit by the window, watching the world go by. She smiled every time, remembering the wild, beautiful creature who had been a part of their lives, if only for a little while. Tommy, too, never forgot. He would tell stories about Leo to his friends at school, his eyes shining with excitement. He was the coolest cat ever, he'd say, a real wild one, and in their hearts, Leo would always remain. A reminder that some things are too wild to tame, but that doesn't mean they can't be loved.